recognized symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to My World. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer, the greatest professional wrestler of all time, your friend and mine, Double J, JArrett. Jeff, how are you, man?
Oh, Conrad, how we doing today, pal? I don't even know where to start, Conrad, but looking forward to doing a deep dive on this episode. I don't even know if we titled this yet because I've got a bone to pick with you as we get into the notes, but that's neither here nor there. You know, we don't have football. It feels like we haven't had any groundbreaking, earth-shattering wrestling news in the last 7 days. So if we have to rehash or, I don't know, latest developments, kind of feels a little bit of calm in the wrestling world. Baseball's cranking up. WrestleQuest, I'll give you another update in a couple of weeks. I will not bombard you with all that kind of updates today, but been busy. Went down to Rome, Georgia, and watched my daughter play basketball. They won their first round game in the tournaments. Go back this Saturday for the semifinals and finals. So life is good. Life is busy. Don't really know, Conrad. Without football, do we still have the right to just
Bust on Abyss? Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going with. I mean, the door's still open there, right?
I mean, that's what I miss more than anything is busting on Chris Park. I mean, that was way more fun than watching people throw the pigskin around.
Well, you know, I thought about this. I think he's option 1A, but maybe 1B could be that old half-baked. I mean, back in the TNA days, and we'll just talk about the TNA days, that guy, Rudy, I forget his name. He was a Hammond. Rudy Charles. Have you ever seen a worse ref than him, Conrad?
Than Rudy Charles?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple on TV every week, but I won't name names. You know exactly what I'm talking about, too.
Oh, would you stop?
But it'd be rude to say that. Let's talk about some good news.
Go ahead. Yeah, we won't lump them together. Go ahead.
You got back in the swing of things.
No,
I don't know if there was a paperwork mix-up or what. But for the first time in 4 months, you wrestled on TV.
Oh.
I mean, I don't know if you were back there in the Eric Bischoff position catering this entire time or what was going on, but dude, you got on TV, but damn it, the Dark Order let you down. I mean, there's no way that you and Satnam and Jay Lethal would have lost that fall. No chance.
Zero chance.
Yes.
Zero chance.
And that's a Photoshop if you're watching with us over on YouTube. I have it on good authority that JArrett gave him a guitar necklace, but you know, notice that the fix is in with Marcus here. He didn't have a screen grab of that. No, he's got this Photoshop that Silva worked up or something. Cause you've never even been in a prone position like that. I don't remember ever seeing you count the lights. Not one time.
Well, Marcus he's getting paid off probably by Ref Aubrey or some shenanigans. It's just, don't you have a shot of me giving somebody a stroke? I mean, a legal 1, 2, 3, it was over. And referee looked the other way. I don't know if did they edit that out? I'm not sure what they did, edit it out. I don't know.
Thankfully, we've got a little backup. Your friend and mine, man, there's a whole fun Twitter account out there of just playing your greatest hits. You're just cracking people upside their dome piece one after another. Is that Twitter account the gift that keeps on giving or what?
It's JJ's greatest guitar shots. Is that right, Marcus? JJ's greatest hits, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. You're gonna have to we'll look it up. Conrad, will you help me out here? I think it's at JJ's greatest at JJ Guitar Shots.
I mean, that's what we needed. We needed somebody to go back and take a look at all your greatest hits, and now we've got it. So quick plug there for that fun Twitter account. We'll make sure that we throw some love on our Twitter as well. We're home stretching it, man. Sting's retirement is right around the corner. I can't believe this is real. we saw Darby Allin come out and cut a big time shoot promo on the Young Bucks to close Dynamite this past week. And now we know that we've just got one set of tapings and then one set for the go home here in Huntsville, Alabama. And then we're finally in Greensboro. A handful of tickets remain. They're going to be over 16,000. Ain't no doubt about it. In the meantime, though, Dynamite this week, we've got FTR taking on BCC. We got Samoa Joe in there as well. How about Swerve and Brian Cage and Hook? I mean, there's a lot of Hangman and RVD. I mean,
coming back. How about
this
that?
is a loaded damn card, and it's going down in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tickets are on sale now. AEWTIX.com. Collision is going to be back on track. Of course, they were preempted by the All-Star game this past week, but Thunder Rosa and Serena Deeb are going to be in action. Bryan Danielson going to be taking on Akiyama. Boy, we're putting together some dream matches lately in AEW. And then next week, it's my turn. You guys are coming to Huntsville, Alabama. I'm excited to see Man versus Food Part 42. It's going to be a good day.
Are you going to meet me at catering? Because look, you got to strategically head into catering. You got to get there early enough. Where I do. My partner Jay Lethal sometimes marvels at me, and we kind of line things up. But you gotta get there early so you can space your meals out right at that 3-hour mark, and boom, you got to come on strong. And if you find out that you're not doing any in-ring work, you kind of catch right before showtime, Connie, and you just kind of graze back in there, if that makes sense to you. So I'm hoping that you can attend. Hope your boy Cassio might show up. I just want to keep my hands away from him because he'll take his head and jaw and cheek. He loves to throw his cheek right at my hand. So
it's unfair, really. I mean, you ought to consider litigation.
Well, and I'm coming into his backyard, his hometown, and he just doesn't show the right kind of hospitality. Like you, Conrad, you're like, come on over here, kind sir. Would you like to go to G's and we'll maybe get a meet and three, or we'll Longhorn, whatever it may be. No, not Cassio. He's got to walk in, order as usual, 17 colors of liquor, sugar and liquor mixed together. He gets 2 or 3 of those, and then he'll order him. I don't know, Conrad. It's how long you been friends with him?
Too long. I mean, I was expecting for him to come in. He would have given you the type of entrance you deserve. The Coming to America. We need someone in front singing, someone throwing rose petals. None of that. If he's not careful, he's going to get a guitar necklace in Huntsville, Alabama. I'm just here to tell you,
Conrad. Then I don't say this for clickbait, but did you see the Super Bowl? And I know there's a tragedy that happened right after it, but did you see the parade?
I only saw the tragedy. I didn't see much of the actual parade.
Travis Kelce singing, Garth Brooks, Friends in Low Places.
Missed that.
Google it. I'll just say that.
Well, I've had some other people in my ear telling me recently that Travis Kelce may have been a bad influence on old Tay-Tay.
Oh,
you may have to step in as a bonus dad or something there for her.
Yep.
Turn that around.
Might get grounded. She may be. Yep.
If she has to clean the leaves out of the pool with Cody this summer, that'd be tremendous.
Guess what Cody's favorite theme music is currently?
Swerve.
It'll come back around to that because he can do the swerve dance like no other, but he's into the EVPs, Matt and Nick.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard that?
I don't know if I've heard the new one.
You would know the vibe that it's given off because it comes from one of your favorite shows, or it certainly appears like that.
Well, let me say that, and maybe I'm oversharing and I shouldn't be, but have you heard Sting's new theme?
You know what? I saw a Twitter blurb. No, I haven't.
It's good.
Is it?
Yeah.
Love it.
But you buried the lead there. My man Cody knows the swerve dance.
Oh,
what do we got to do to get him on here doing the swerve dance?
Have you never seen?
I will next Wednesday. I hope he's coming to TV, right?
You kidding me? Have you never seen Codes do the swerve dance? No.
No, I've seen you and Eric do it.
As we're recording this, we're celebrating a national holiday.
He's available right now. If you could, while I'm doing one of the ad reads, if you could arrange a run in, boy, that'd be something special.
Can we get music? Do I need to play the music? I'll just have him bring the music.
He's got the music.
Yeah, well, we'll put it in the mic. Okay.
Yeah. Well, no, we don't even need that. We can add that in post. Don't worry. We need him to do his thing. You don't worry about the audio. We'll make that happen.
Okay. All right. That's a deal. I mean, oh boy.
Dude, it's unbelievable. And so is the card that they have built for Revolution. If you haven't already, go ahead and make plans to join them on pay-per-view. Tickets are on sale, a handful, AEWTIX.com. I'll be watching on pay-per-view. It looks like it's going to be Darby and Sting taking on the Young Bucks. And Sting is an AEW champion. Will he retire undefeated? Stay tuned. Samoa Joe will be defending the AEW title against not just Swerve Strickland, but Hangman Adam Page. Eddie Kingston will be defending the Continental Crown against Bryan Danielson, and Will Ospreay will be taking on Takeshita. It is a loaded doggone card, and we are pumped that you get to be a big part of it, Jeff. Speaking of being a big part of things, we should give a little plug. You guys are about to embark on, in just a couple of weeks now, a big tour of Canada. On March 16th, you'll be in Ottawa. On the 20th, you'll be in Toronto. On the 27th, in Quebec City. On March 30th, London, Ontario. On April 10th, Winnipeg, Manitoba. On May 8th, this is just announced, Edmonton. And how about Vancouver getting a little love on May the 11th? Man, just a ton of Canadian dates now officially on the schedule. How pumped are you to be back in Canada?
You know, what's very, very cool is kind of in my day job, I'm working in the peripheral of all this. But the Earnhardt Foundation, obviously, which is near and dear to my heart, they're getting engaged. And hey, look, the Earnhardt Cup and everything that went with that the last, 2 years now. But now just, running the entire tour, coast to coast, Vancouver, a new market, London, a new market. It's pretty cool, Conrad. And, I've always been fond of our friends north of the border and their legit affinity for professional wrestling. TNA days were good. Canada was good to us. Obviously dating way, way, way back. 94 was the first time I was there. But from coast to coast, the Canadian fans come out loud and proud. So I am looking forward to those shows.
We're also looking forward to today's topic. Man, we have been talking about WCW at the end for quite a while, and we are going to hit it hard here. But before we do, I want to talk about something we just recently debuted over on adfreeshows.com.
Oh, yeah.
Jeff, it's a brand new series over at adfreeshows.com with the beer and the drinking and the cane swinging. It's the ECW legend himself, the Sandman. That's right. The Sandman is now on adfreeshows.com. He's an incredible storyteller. He is pulling absolutely no punches, and he is one of the iconic characters in ECW history and lore. And we have a little clip here from episode 1. Sandman is going to talk about some of the hardcore legends that he took inspiration from. Let's play that clip right now.
All these promos got cut, dude, like early morning. And I always went last because I like to watch everybody else's promo. You know what I mean? So I would sit around, I'm partying, all back in them days, all the kind of party materials that were around. So yeah, you would just hang out with your friends. Hey, what's up, man? It's your turn. Go cut a promo. Your turn. Awesome. Go cut a promo, And that's how I would learn. Dude, I got to watch, think about these dudes. I got to watch, Terry Funk. I got to watch Cactus Shack. I got to watch Shane Douglas. Dude, those three guys, the promos that those three guys could just cut. Dude, I got goosebumps right now because I learned so much then. Not so much how to do a promo because my character was, I always thought that the less that I said was better. I'm a violent dude. You know what I mean? I'm a dude. I'm not going to cut a promo on you. I'm going to beat you over there with a pull kill.
Right.
You know what I mean? I learned from those guys. I learned so much by just sitting around and watching them.
There you go. Inner Sandman is live now. Episode 1 is up at adfreeshows.com. We got a ton of other bonus content too, like Lex Express with Lex Luger. We're going to be doing it live this Saturday morning, just hours after Elimination Chamber, and you can be on live on video and ask Lex a question. We've also just dropped the book with David Crockett, where we break down February of 1986, the biggest year in Jim Crockett Promotions history. Every single Tuesday, we sit down with Kevin Sullivan for something we call Tuesdays with the Taskmaster. Monday mailbag alternates. Some weeks it's Mike Chioda. The other week it'll be Nick Patrick. No matter what you're looking for, we got it. All this and more at adfreeshows.com. And we've got a poll about what topics we are going to be looking for in the future. In the past, we have always used our polling function over on Twitter. Now we're going to be utilizing our polling function on YouTube. So if you haven't already, be sure to hit us up on YouTube. That's 83 weeks on youtube.com. And you can see, what we're going to be talking about next and drop some questions and the whole deal, all in our community side of our YouTube page. That's My World on youtube.com. Jeff, what a story.
Before we get into, did you know the Sandman worked Memphis? Have I ever told
you? I did.
Okay. Yeah.
You haven't told me the story about it, but I've seen clips. A
couple different stories, but gosh, what year was that? That had to be 88, 80. I felt like a kid. And I just remember him coming in, but the Sandman in Memphis is not the Sandman of ECW. He carried a surfboard. Like that's the that's the type kind of surfboard.
He was there in 91 and 92.
Okay. Yeah. But there's a surfer boy Sting and there's a surfer boy Sandman. But yeah, that's the first time I met Brother James. But
I think he was calling himself Mr. Sandman back then.
Well, okay. Maybe.
I mean, it's a little different, but he was wearing a wetsuit and carrying a freaking surfboard.
I was going to say he wrestled in a wetsuit, and I think that dude has got to be sweating his ass off in that thing. But when I don't say years.
Have you worn a wetsuit before?
Oh yeah,
for anything? Okay, so I'm just curious.
In the lake, though, like when you go in March, it's especially way back in the day when I'd slalom ski. You definitely put one on because we try to ski. Gosh. In early March when the water is freezing. It's hard to get off and on.
Does it restrict your movement?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really.
And so it just makes you sweat. I mean, it can't breathe. It's not breathable. So you're sweating, but you can still move around.
Yeah. It's super skin tight.
I only asked because I've never worn a wetsuit, but I was like, I've seen guys wrestle in like cowboy boots and jeans. And sometimes I'm like, man, that's got to be.
Yeah.
It can't give you the same sort of movement and freedom right? Am I wrong on that?
I was never a big fan of like you'd have to do the bunkhouse brawls or street fights and do them in jeans. And then some, many times I've wrestled in cowboy boots. It's just different. Yeah. I was never really a big fan of that, but old Sandman working in that wetsuit and carrying the surfboard. And then years later when I that can't be the same Sandman. Yep. That is the Sandman bashing the beer on his head and the cane and people going ballistic. And anyway, it was, as characters evolve, so goes the business.
Let's jump into what we're talking about today, the business and all that was WCW in 2001. We're going to call it the Magnificent Seven. It was formed and led by the on-screen CEO of WCW at the time, Ric Flair. And this was from January to March of 2001. This group, the Magnificent Seven, included Scott Steiner, his valet Madeja, the United States champion Rick Steiner, Jeff Jarrett, Lex Luger, Buff Bagwell, and Road Warrior Animal. Man, what a crazy group of folks that is. That's quite a faction there.
Diving back into this, Conrad, and look, to pull back just a little bit, especially maybe, new listeners or younger listeners, probably better said than that. So WCW closed in March of 2001. So this is the last 90 days of the company. Of course, at the time, Conrad, and that's why I was going to ask you as we kind of dove into this. I'm sure you covered this with Shivani and Eric, multiple layers, and I don't even know. Yeah, probably Bruce from the other side. But the average, like, do you even remember the Magnificent Seven, like that being on TV? I was going to say I was in it and don't really remember as we kind of dove into the notes and all this. I remember us as a group and it was kind of loosely together and Flair doing his promo and all that. But these times, and this is this is the one question I want to ask you. When would the remote, when would the rumors or the chatter start going that, hey man, Bischoff might buy this thing? Because or I know my dad had come to me and they were trying to do some due diligence. When did all that chatter start? Was it in 2000 or just it didn't start till early 2001?
No, it was in 2000. There was conversation about all that happening in 2000. And then we know in 2001, it started to really heat up and then no more.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I did not remember the name of this faction. I mean, I remember. I mean, when Sabato first said, hey, what about the Magnificent Seven? I'm thinking, all right, was that the University of Michigan? No, that was the Fab Five. Was that no. And so then it's like, all right, I don't really know what we're talking about there. And then it clicked and I was like, oh wait, okay. I kind of remember that.
I did the exact same thing.
Yes. Because, and I'll be honest, it makes me happy to hear that you felt that way too.
I was in it.
So much of this was forgettable for us fans, and clearly it was for the talent as well.
Well, so and I read the notes and then I kind of go back and really do I'll call it a deep dive on this. And so last night I did my kind of first pass through, and then this morning at the gym, kind of looking back into it, I started thinking about, oh yeah, we did that and we did that and we did that. But the overall vibe was, hey, this creative that's being done is obviously the long play, because you wouldn't say, hey, I'm going to do this angle with Flair and Dusty, and we're going to get to that. It's a lot of fun. And yes, Flair and Dusty for the very first time on pay-per-view didn't happen until 2001. We'll get to that in a minute. But just doing the deep dive on it, we were all executing this creative and had no idea where it was going, but knew it was, or assumed this is going for the new owners.
Right.
But this was the true, not the beginning of the end of the end of WCW as we knew it, but there was going to be a new WCW. So we did all of this with that in the back of our mind. And to say that it probably wasn't, this is one of the most bizarre times, because we didn't ask questions, because we kind of knew that we certainly didn't have any answers. But man, maybe Bischoff and what was the name of the company? Because I always kind of something Fusion Media. Like, okay, what are they looking at? So there was a little impetus of the political side of things. Like, all right, what's really going on here? So anyway, I thought I just set that I don't recall the Magnificent, but the creative I remember, and just not really sure where any of this was going. And I guess at this point in my WCW second run, I was enjoying the ride as much as I possibly could, because I damn sure didn't know where things were headed.
Well, so now that we've sort of got the table set, let's pick up at the very beginning of this story, I suppose. It's the Sin pay-per-view, and this went down in January of 2001, January 14th. Normally that's the sold out month, but here we're going to do Sin. Scott Steiner is defending his big gold belt. It's a 4-way match that includes Sid Vicious, Jeff Jarrett, and an unnamed wrestler. Flair would insert Road Warrior Animal as the mystery man and is recruiting Jarrett so Steiner could keep the title. But of course, none of that was needed, because something horrible happened. You were in the ring when Sid tried to jump off the top rope and do the big kick, and boy, it was brutal. Meltzer would say the original plan was for Sid to make a comeback, have Steiner up for the choke slam. When the mystery man would come down, everyone would freeze, and the guy would tell Sid to choke slam Steiner. But when he did, he'd turn on Sid and do something that would allow Steiner to make the pin. Even with that original plan, it was Animal, who's 41, and he was the big surprise, another name from the 80s in a company that desperately needs to reinvent itself from its current perception as a company featuring outdated talent on top. The match itself we're talking about only went 7 minutes and 53 seconds. Meltzer would say the show was going very long at this point. Well, I guess some other segments had gone long. So the match consisted of them double teaming on Sid and Sid making the most pathetic comebacks. He did a double suplex, nearly killed Jeff Jarrett in the process, dropping him on his head. Sid chokeslammed Jarrett, but Steiner saved. Flair's music plays and the mystery man came out. But by this time, Sid had broken his leg and was on the ground immobile. The mystery man weakly attacked Sid and had Steiner pin him and then unmasked his Animal. -2 stars. Man, it's one of the ugliest main events in wrestling history. It's the exact opposite of what WCW needed in January 2001. But as we learned in the Forrest Gump movie, shit happens. Goodness gracious. Is this the most brutal injury you were in the ring to see? And what do you remember of that day?
So, Connie, where was your fandom at during this time? Had you checked out?
No, I was still casually watching. I did not get this pay-per-view, but I was still keeping up. I knew what was going on. I wasn't ordering every pay-per-view every month for WCW. I still was probably watching them all for the WWF. And I think I watched ECW that month in their last pay-per-view. But that's probably it. I did make the decision that month, though. I'm going to watch the ECW pay-per-view and I'm going to watch the Royal Rumble. I'm going to lay out a sin. I don't regret it, but man, when I tuned in to Nitro the next night and they're showing that leg flopping around, woo, it's a visual I'll never forget. And I just saw it on TV.
Yeah, well, so either Sid clotheslined me out or butt me out. I was outside the ring. Yeah, if I remember correctly. So I took a bump out on hard camera side and I was looking away from the ring. And I remember the spot that was supposed to come up that Sid was going to back himself in the corner, hop up. And I know that him and Laurinaitis had discussions on, if I remember correctly, I don't say there was just discussion on how we got into that spot. I'm sure Steiner was a part of it and all this, but it was, okay, here's the spot that led to whatever. And I can remember just the gasp because I didn't see it. But just the gasp. But when I kind of looked up in the ring and you saw his, I'll call it his thigh and his kneecap going one way and his ankle going floppily the other way, I just turned my head and I went, oh boy. And I knew that I wasn't supposed to come back in the ring until a couple of other things that were supposed to happen. And man, I'm sure we're going to have the clip. And again, so I may not have a little bit of a foggy memory, but I just remember Steiner like having to kind of lay the boots to Sid. And I think Animal was like, what the hell are we? It was a complete disaster in every stretch of the imagination, thinking we got to get this damn thing over with. And if I remember correctly, Scott pinned Sid, and in the process, he pulled his leg to hook the leg for the 1, 2, 3. It was a mess. I mean, just an absolute mess. And the one thing I do remember the next day at Nitro, they were talking. They're like, "Hey Jeff, you want to come see it?" And I'm like, "Hell no, I don't want to come see this damn thing." Yeah, I'm not into watching stuff like that. Not even one time, let alone multiple times. But yeah, it was a mess. And Scotty was right in the middle. It was It was bad. It was a bad. You never want to see anybody go down like that, and that took Sid years to kind of
3.5 years before he was in a ring again.
Yeah, it was a bad one.
He only did 24 more matches after this, never for a major promotion. But
Wow.
yeah, 3.5 years before he was ever doing anything in the ring again.
Yeah.
At least according to cagematch.net.
Yeah, no, it's bad.
This is from the Observer. Bischoff told wrestlers the next day that they found out Vicious had a broken back that he didn't even know about. Vicious was in incredible pain, and his lower leg actually had to be held in place to keep it from flopping sideways.
Yep.
But forgetting about the injury, it's one thing to have a bad main event in the ring that draws money, although past experience shows that ultimately hurts in the long run. It's another to have one even worse that doesn't. So he's pretty critical of the creative, but I'm sure nobody was thinking about the creative afterwards. Everybody was worrying about Sid. I mean, this was maybe the most gruesome injury I ever saw in wrestling. Now that I think about it,
It's definitely. I hate to even bring it up. The Owen situation.
yeah.
Tragic, but his, necks and arms and legs, and it'd be. I don't recall one certainly that I was involved with, but hey, I was just as you were saying that. So, who was booking or writing? Was it? And I know that Eric was running point. Was it the committee? I know Ed Farrar was a part of it. Do you know who the team was?
I'm under the impression that this was a constantly evolving team.
Yeah, I think so.
Like at this point, people are trying to just keep the train on the tracks and not make any crazy moves is the word that I've gotten over the years. But we know that Bischoff is helping with creative, but he's not like.
I don't remember him being in the nuts and bolts. I remember on a flight, maybe a week before this, or I don't know, before it all that me and Sid and Johnny were all in first and kind of having a conversation just about it. But that's what made me start thinking. Was Nash in there? Was Ed Farrar, Terry Taylor, Bill Banks? I'm just trying to think of the committee, if you will, that was really under Eric's direction. That was my impression. I just don't remember who all the committee was.
And this is also sort of this era is the rise of prominence of Johnny Laurinaitis in a backstage role here in America.
For sure.
Here in WCW.
For sure.
Man, I don't know how we move on from talking about Sid and his leg flopping around like that. I mean, you really witnessed the end of a guy's career. And
you have to say flop.
Well, I'm just thinking, I don't want my career to end and I don't want to be flopping around. That's why I need to study some hard times from Blue Chew. They're our sponsor this week and every week. If you haven't tried it already, what are you waiting for? Blue Chew is a unique online service that has the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but in chewable form and at a fraction of the cost. Take these dudes anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. And the process is super simple. You sign up at BlueChew.com, you consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. And here's the best part, man, it's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, all in a discreet package. But there won't be anything discreet about your package. Blue Chew wants to help you have better sex, so discover your options at BlueChew.com. Chew it and do it. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code MyWorld at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com. The promo code is MyWorld, and you'll receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we want to thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast.
Conrad?
Yes, sir.
One of my favorite Blue Chew reads, if you will, is you and Mick. A hot tag
for your wiener.
Yeah. Brother's getting back in shape.
Man, he did his first workout, did his first weigh in. He's already down a few pounds, and he's trying to get down to 275 pounds. I think Mick's last match might have some legs, Jeff.
I was going to say the Conrad motivation is beginning to rear its beautiful face. I'll say that. But when I saw that first workout, he's planking. I'm like, God bless him. God bless him. Going to be interesting. So
Yeah, it will.
I think there's a few blue chewed reeds left in his life.
How about that? The next night on Nitro, Flair is going to reveal this was all a plan, and he's announcing a creation of the stable, which he's calling the Elite. Yeah, Flair did that in 2001. That prompted the Insiders. It's not the Outsiders. You see, that was Hall and Nash. This is the Insiders. That's Nash and DDP and Rick Steiner. They're all going to come out and confront the group as Nash is challenging Scott Steiner to a title match. WCW's commissioner at the time, Ernest Miller, comes out and books the title match, which ends in a disqualification because both sides interfered. But yeah, how about that? What could have been the Elite? Maybe rather than the Magnificent Seven, the Elite. I mean, here we are joking week in, week out about how you inserted yourself in the Four Horsemen and you inserted yourself in the Bullet Club and you inserted yourself in the NWO and you inserted yourself in the Clique. And now to find out, after all that, you were also one of the founding members of the Elite.
How about that? You never knew, did you?
I didn't know. I mean,
H and Big Papa and the list goes on and on. But I would love to know and go back. Why didn't they stick with the Elite? The Magnificent Seven kind of shoehorns us into 7 guys.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
funny.
Interesting.
And I can't wait to hear next week how you really created DX.
Oh, no. That's on the schedule. That I don't think that's till May.
October. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're going to get to it in May.
So the opening segment for the Nitro that went down on the 15th is just the last Bischoff / Russo return with new sides being drawn. Instead of the New Blood versus the Millionaires Club, now it's Flair's team versus Nash's team. The good guys are Nash, Page, and Rick Steiner. The bad guys are Flair, Animal, Steiner, Bagwell, Luger, and Jarrett. It's the perfect opportunity to build some new faces, whether it's Awesome or Conan or General Hugh G. Rection or O'Hare. I'll stick them in there with all the big boys. And that's a little suggestion from Dave Meltzer. Speaking of Mike Awesome, we haven't talked about him a lot, but he came up in our conversation with Tony Schiavone last week when we had Orange Cassidy on the Tony podcast, What Happened When. And we talked about Mike Awesome and how awesome, pardon the pun, he was in FMW and ECW. How did you feel like he was used in WCW? I mean, you're going to go out and start your own thing. Do you think he could have been better utilized in WCW? Did they miss the boat with him?
You know what? It's all perception. This goes to the territory days when I had firsthand experience of Lawler's booking versus JArrett's booking. You get into just the different iterations depending upon, Vince McMahon was the ultimate rider, but who was in his inner circle? Was it Bruce and Pat? Was it Vince and Ed? Was it, I'll call it a Brian Goritz led creative team, Ed Koski led creative team, just the different iterations. WCW went from Kevin Sullivan and the different eras that kind of go through, and then the Russo and then the Bischoff, and then just kind of the ins and outs on how that really affects talent in so many ways. And you look at a guy like Mike Awesome, he was another one that came through Memphis in the early days, but he had found kind of his groove and his niche and come over from ECW, obviously for the money. But he went from ECW, I believe, world champion. And I don't know how many months it took. We'll call it the WCW creative process led by Vince Russo to turn him into that 70s guy. And how did that really work out? Well, it didn't, obviously, but Mike was a big athletic competitor that was transformed into a character that I don't think Mike felt it was even remotely an extension of his personality. He was playing this part for the check for all intents and purposes, but it just never jived. Mike was a great dude, a hard worker, You know, I think he would have had much better success. That how do we make an even bigger an extension of his personality of the Mike Awesome of ECW, but it didn't go that way.
The opening segment with all those guys mentioned come out. The heels are doing a mock funeral of Goldberg's career here, and Flair's going to show up as a heel and say he was the one who screwed Goldberg, and it wasn't that Animal and Steiner conspired against Flair, but that Flair was in on it. And he explained all that on TV, but never explained why. But he did say it was all part of the long-term plan. What'd you think of this funeral for Goldberg's career? Were you a fan of this creative? Because it feels kind of weird.
Again, back to WCW creative at the time. And my overall feeling on, and look, there's been funerals, there's been, you know, family get-togethers. Me, Jay Lethal and crew went down to the farm, the Briscoe farm. At TNA, we had a funeral that I thought was super successful on burying Team 3D. It's all been done, but to do one live in the ring ups the chances of it falling apart exponentially. If it's done in post-production, you can clip, because it's a different cadence. You're shooting a television scene with wrestlers that are at varying degrees different actors, but this was a real challenge. As you say, sometimes go out of your way to watch it. Fans, you don't really have to go out of your way to watch this.
No,
it wasn't real good TV, but it was, I'll call it another segment on Nitro and Thunder.
The following episode of Thunder, we see Ernest the Cat Miller booked totally buff in a match against Chronic, which they won after you interfered. DDP comes down to help. Flair's going to help book DDP and JArrett in a fight for the main event. That match goes to a no contest as Nash, Chronic, Miller, Scott Steiner, Luger, Bagwell, and Animal all interfere. My goodness. Interference in every match. I mean, this is just, I guess, the story we're trying to tell, that it's chaos and it's battle, but it doesn't feel very compelling then, now, or ever to me. What say you?
Yeah. Just the creative, and either we were doing Nitro and Thunder both in the same night, we were about to do. Again, the vibe and the tension and the unknown, just once 2001 rolled around and the first pay-per-view, and, you know, I don't say ironically, but yeah, just the main event was a disaster. I don't know what the opposite word of momentum is. What did that be, Conrad? No momentum. That was WCW. There was just no momentum whatsoever. And so now we're a year, or not say a year removed, but 6 months removed from the Bash at the Beach and the Hogan lawsuit, and or just that. And Vince had at this point come and gone. Russo had come and gone 2 or 3 times. The creative team, if you will, just struggled week to week. And then there were so many guys on the roster that had really got comfortable with, I'm just going to pick up a check. And at this point, people were saying, I'm just going to pick up a check and be hopeful that some change is coming.
I mean, I kind of felt that watching, you know, I felt like I would probably be in that same camp, but, you know, it's one thing to think that, it's another to hear it, I suppose. There's a special Tuesday Nitro, because at this point, we're not even bashful about preempting Nitro. Nash is going to demand a title shot against Steiner at Super Brawl Revenge, which Flair agrees to as long as Nash can beat Bagwell later that night. Ernest the Cat Miller books a match between Luger and DDP. The winner will referee the Nash and Buff Bagwell match, and he bans Buff and Nash from interfering. Luger wins his match after JArrett hits DDP with a guitar, so he's going to be the ref for the main event. And Nash wins his match with DDP, or his match rather, after DDP knocked Luger out and counted the pin with Luger's hand. So you know what happens there. A big brawl in the ring. Again. In the Observer, we would see the recap from Thunder. Jarrett beat Morris in a solid match, ending when Wall interfered, chokeslamming Morris. They doubled on him until DDP came out of the crowd for the save. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about Bill DeMott, General Hugh G. Rections. What was your working experience like with Bill?
I met him the first time down in my first WCW run at the Universal Tapings. Bill is a hell of a worker. I'll call him a big guy. I'm not saying he's 6'6", but he's definitely not a little guy. But moonsaults off the top and just super athletic. Again, Russo and company saw the value and his talent, but look, it's coming off the Attitude Era. At that time, I guess in a lot of ways it was, hey, let's try to continue that Attitude Era or inject some attitude mentality into the WCW product with Hugh G. Rection is Hugh's name, but that's a comedy name to begin with out of the gate. So again, a tough road for Hugh to battle from a character development standpoint.
The story winds up being a lot of Flair and Nash. It feels like everybody else is just sort of side players at this point. And on the next Nitro, Flair is going to sign Dustin Rhodes to a contract, but he and Animal attack Rhodes until Dusty comes out to his son's rescue. It's pretty fun. Dusty on TV in 2001. Jarrett and DDP are about to have a match. However, Jarrett wins by countout after the police escort DDP away in handcuffs because he's been fingered, I guess, for assault and battery. In the main event, Nash is going to defeat Totally Buff to get his title shot versus Scott Steiner at Super Brawl Revenge. At this point, did you know where you're going as far as Flair and Dusty and what your involvement was going to be with all that?
Not at all. And for those folks, because when I was going through the notes, I had, again, one of those things went like, Totally Buff. Like, what? That is the tag team of the Total Package Lex Luger.
And Buff Bagwell.
Yeah, but that slipped me at first. The first time I read it in the notes, I'm like, I don't think. Anyway, so Totally Buff is, Conrad. So first time I met Dusty was in the mid '80s at the Great American Bash, but I was a kid. He probably had no recollection other than that's the promoter's kid over there, whatever it may be.
Little man's kid. Yes, that's about it. And then I met him at a would it be NWA or WCW, but late '80s kind of time frame house show, and then then the next kind of in my mind working in Texas, the Von Erich Jarrett promotion, if you will, and Crockett had come by and said, yeah, that's when I found out that Dusty, quote unquote, would love to get Jeff in WCW. And my dad said no, without me knowing. But this is the first time I got to work with Dusty. Like he was there. Hey, we're going to do this. And man, the charisma he's a charmer. No matter where or who he was talking to, the charisma just oozed out. So when he came on the scene, I had no idea where they were going with it, but I was up for it. Again, a guy that my first really taste of the American dream was he was coming in running opposition to my family's promotion. But damn, this dude's charismatic. And I had seen just a tidbit here and there in my dad's office of Florida tapes, and Dusty was on some of them. It's pretty cool to think that you had this opportunity. I mean, I know you worked with Flair back in '96, but to have the idea that you get to work with Flair and with Dusty here, pretty cool. Thunder on the 31st, we see Rick Steiner pin Jarrett with the Steiner driver. And the report from the live crowd to Dave said, quote unquote, said to be sad. I don't think they were talking about your work. Did you feel like Rick Steiner was winding it down at this point in his career? We know not too long after WCW went down, he said, that's enough. Was he ready to just go home and
Yes.
learn a new hold at this point?
He was, and look, as I sit back and reflect on it, him and Eric have always been pretty tight. I think they were probably much tighter back in these days than they are now, just because of time. But I felt Rick had checked out mentally, and for years he was in that tag team, and Scotty would be, you go back and watch their matches. I thought they're I don't say they're underrated, but the Steiner at their peak, Japan, just really being a well-oiled tag team that were unique, legit brothers and all that, were really, they were fascinating to watch. But this stage of Rick's career, he had, to me, more than tapped out, and trying to get a match together with him. Oh my God. I'm talking about at this stage, very uninspired, had no idea how lack of interest he showed. And it wasn't me personally. It was, he just, we'll just go out there and do a little bit of this and that, and I'll make a comeback. And we'll do whatever the finish. And it was what it was, pal. You know what? Even in these dying days, though, wasn't great. But what were our crowds? You got a Google machine over there, Conrad, that might have.
They're not good. I mean, you guys are, I'm not going to say it's the worst run, but it certainly feels like it's in there.
The early 90s, but where had recently been.
Yes.
When we've gone over that.
Like Super Brawl Revenge, which was in Nashville, did 4,395 fans. So we'll round it up and call it 4,400, which isn't embarrassing. I mean, it's not the worst, but considering that it used to just be bananas. I mean, you were doing nitros, say January in Fort Wayne, Indiana. You did 48.36 in the house, 35.55 paid.
Yeah.
So it's not that bad. The Sin show had 6,600 fans in the house, 4,600 paid. It's not like 900 tickets, because there were some pretty difficult WCW TV tapings in the early 90s, but respectfully, they had a whole different budget back then. You know what I mean?
Big time.
So your costs had just, you're hemorrhaging cash at this point. And by the way, I was mistaken. I kind of assumed that Rick only wrestled a year or two after WCW went down. That's not true. My man wrestled 235 more times.
He did. Yeah, go ahead.
Pretty extensive tour over in Japan with multiple promotions over in Japan.
And he worked some for us at TNA. Not a lot, but some.
I just always thought that he sort of took a bigger gap in there before he showed up in TNA, but that's not the case. I mean, he was wrestling in 2002, just never again with Vince, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
The Observer is going to recap the February 7th, 2001 episode of Thunder. Flair came out with Bagwell, Animal, Luger, JArretts, and Steiners, who are now called the Magnificent Seven. So this is where they're named officially, I suppose. And the main event was Nash and Page over JArrett and Rick Steiner. Nash is going to powerbomb Steiner. And the show ends up with another standoff between Flair's guys against Nash's guys. I know we've heard a lot about there being quote unquote cliques in wrestling and that sort of thing. Was that very much the case here at the end of WCW in early 2001? Were there big cliques?
I think there's always been cliques. I mean, I think there always will be. At least it's kind of, again, a locker room. I recently heard, you just kind of hear how the NBA through the years, the cliques and the groups used to be, teammates. And Celtics, Pistons, you didn't talk to the other teammate, even in, the other team, even in the off season. And now you've got a group of guys that don't play on any teams, but they're still buds and this and that. But no, in wrestling, it's always had cliques and buds and all that kind of stuff. But again, I'm going to go back to the last 90 days, if you will. nobody was really sure. And I think Bischoff shared some plans with some of his inner circle. And I think talent wise, that would have been maybe Rick Steiner, and you may know better than me, but not many, but the unknown. So there were guys that I guess you could say from a generational standpoint that, the Magnificent Seven, we were all, in kind of a group, and you just had different groups, if you will. God, when I just got them, it is amazing to watch from 99 to 2001. Has there been a more rapid decline? I don't say decline, but change in
I can't think of one.
I guess you could say from hot to not hot.
Right.
Yeah. And I know music acts, it happens all the time. I mean, it happens more often than you think. They're hot one summer, and the next summer they hadn't come out with any hits, and they've all been passed by. So it happens. But man, WCW, what a different era we're talking about right here.
The following week, you're in the main event of the Valentine's Day Thunder for the Go Home show for Super Bowl. The Observer would say the main was JArrett and Rick Steiner over DDP and Rhodes, which included a Scott Steiner run-in and JArrett pinning DDP with the stroke, and the show ended with another huge brawl. Report is it wasn't overall a good show, but at least those from there who were there live, there was no sign of Nash on Thunder. And apparently the selling point of the show is they don't know if Nash will be ready for the pay-per-view or how ready he'll be, which is a strange way to try and hook people into buying a show by telling them the babyface isn't going to be ready for his title match. Boy, when you step back, maybe we were too deep in the forest to see the trees, but when you step back, that is not the best way to sell the pay-per-view.
Was it because of Kevin's dates? Couldn't appear on TV. I mean, the whole what ifs, because I was sitting there going through the notes and thinking, like, there are so many unanswered questions that, man, I'd almost like to be in your seat, be able to ask Eric, say, hey, Eric, in January and February, you had to have had plans on where you hoped it would go. So how did that relate to creative and the pieces of the puzzle put together, and what here? Because
he was going to blow it all up anyway with the Big Bang.
Yeah. And so why wouldn't Nash be on this episode?
He wanted like Rob Van Dam on the show and Joey Styles to be the voice of the show and Jerry Lawler to be his commentary partner. And, he was going to have to go to all the big name talents like the Hogans and the Nashes and people like that and say, hey, love to have you. Can't honor this contract. It sort of worked the WWE angle that they wound up doing. But he felt like since it was him and he would offer more creative whatever, and it was going to be in Las Vegas, that maybe it could be
doable.
An easier circumstance. Yeah. Well, because you're eliminate the WWE schedule in 2001, man, they're hotter than ever. So they're doing more towns than ever. So the travel is what would get you. But if you're just flying into Vegas a couple times a month, that's easier.
Yeah.
By far.
But it's a different mindset too.
Yeah.
Completely. Especially at the stage of where different guys were at in the career.
It's interesting to think too, though, that, and you should bust his balls about this sometime, because I believe that he was one of the guys behind the scenes pushing in TNA saying, we got to get on the road. We can't just be in this damn soundstage. But when he was going to do it with his own money, he was sliding it inside the joint at the Hard Rock. And it was just going to be a show that we slide the shit out for the set. We do our show and then we push it backstage and other people do other things in this venue. But he was kind of doing the same thing in Vegas. That was the plan anyway.
But you know what? The beauty of Memphis TV, we were in a newsroom.
Yeah.
That's where we created all the stories through the years. That's a real blessing, because when I look at NXT, I look at obviously the TNA experience and just kind of look at different, we'll call it venue, residency, studio, all of that And then, okay, just kind of juxtapose. We're gonna be looking at, Sting's last match in Greensboro has great meeting. I think it's the perfect place to have that. That's why I think location is very important. It's the professional wrestling business to a T. It is so subjective. Sting's last match, yes, you need it in a. I don't think so. We're going to have 16,000 people. I don't think 16,000 people in Greensboro is having the 16,000 people in Lubbock, Texas. I think it's very appropriate. That's where we're going. On the other hand, a television show, and they just set a record. WWE did, and Utah and Rock and all that kind of stuff. But that creative had nothing to do with Utah. So it's interesting to hear different opinions on social media about, oh, you can't do a studio and this and that. No, folks, if you make creative, compelling content, they're going to watch, or they're going to come out and watch your live events and da-da-da-da-da. I don't know. Interesting. It really is interesting. And to hear you say, yeah, Eric was one of the ones pushing in TNA. He absolutely maybe leading the charge. No, I got to give that to Hogan. Hogan was leading the charge.
I think, and listen, I understand why he was doing that, but I just think it's interesting that when it was going to be Eric and his own money, he was like, we're going to do the soundstage thing. Just like you did. Let's talk about what the Observer was saying here. The temporary elimination of Kevin Nash and putting as much heat on the heels, in particular the CEO, Ric Flair, as a way to build the new ownership group when they come in to be the big baby faces, was a key piece of business at the Super Brawl pay-per-view on February 19th at the Nashville Municipal Auditorium. Now that is an interesting way to phrase that. The new owners. So did you imagine that we were really turning the volume up with this heel authority figure stuff so Eric Bischoff could come in as a babyface and save the day? Because that is a head scratcher to me. Eric's natural disposition, like if he had his druthers, he'd want to be a heel every time, not the babyface.
But context is king.
Yeah.
The ground laid right and a new, what was he going to call it? The Big Bang?
Yeah.
Coming out of that, I think in a lot of ways he'd been the perfect babyface. Now I think it would have run its course, and he'd need to be flipped back over to being a antagonist. But for short term, Eric make a hell of a babyface, in my opinion.
Let's talk a little bit about the matches here. We got an impromptu match with Canyon and DDP. They go 8 minutes and 15 seconds. And Meltzer would say, to explain this, Jeff Jarrett showed a tape where Page said he'd face Canyon anytime, anywhere. So Jarrett said Flair ordered the match to take place right now. Canyon comes from under the ring, attacks Page. They have a pretty fun match here. After a ref bump, you're going to hit the stroke on Page. Canyon pins him with the flatliner, 3 1/4 stars. And then we see you work DDP. So you're clearly trying to get him to soften up for you. And whereas Canyon beats him, he beats you 8.5 minutes. The match starts right away. And Meltzer would say both bouts were cut back well in time because the show was running so long. And eventually Jarrett's going to clock Page with a chair to the head, but he kicks out. Jarrett goes to hit Page with the guitar, but he moves and hits Canyon instead. And then Page gives Jarrett a diamond cutter for the pin, 3.5 stars. Do you remember your time being cut? What do you remember about Super Brawl in your backyard there?
There was a couple of references during all the notes about our time being cut. I don't remember specifically that. On the flip side to that is they could have, maybe Dave got the report. I don't know, but also in this era of WCW, we had a lot of matches. So not all the matches got a lot of time. They didn't. Another thing, Conrad, a little inside baseball here. Marcus, will you put up that last guitar shot? You see how many pieces that guitar is in right there? Just completely shattered. That is a WCW 101 guitar shot made straight out of Hollywood. Those are the most expensive guitars that I ever swung. So that fan account, JJ Greatest Hits on Twitter, check it out. JJ Greatest Hits. It's got every guitar shot, but the WCW guitar shots from a visual, and when you put them in slow motion, it's a hell of a shot.
What do you recall how much they cost? Those those guitars?
I think they were 700 plus shipping.
Oh wow.
They were prop. They were made. They were
The real deal.
yes, Hollywood guitars.
Yeah. Man, I kind of forgot you guys came to Huntsville. I lived here and I was not here. February 19th, Huntsville, Alabama. Just a show. Not terrible, but it lacked in star power, according to the Observer. The angles at least made sense to build towards the pay-per-view. It opened with a funeral for the career of Nash, bringing up Goldberg, Sting, and Booker T to build for their return. Meltzer would say, all I know is if I die, I want Flair delivering the eulogy. He, with a straight face, said that Nash was a special kind of athlete who only comes around once in a lifetime. Another funeral segment.
Yes. That's
Another
in a month.
And listen, I know this is silly and not a lot of people care, but can we throw that graphic back up there again, Marcus, of Kevin Nash, where we're memorializing him? I just listen, this is important. Context is important. And I know this is silly, and some people will say, yeah, who cares? As a reminder, this show happened in Huntsville, Alabama. And we're looking at a graphic here that says Kevin Nash, RIP, February 18th, 2001, which is also the same date Dale Earnhardt died. That's a little like, I understand. We think we got to have a freaking, I just don't understand why nobody had the foresight to think, hey guys, there really was a famous person who died yesterday in Daytona, Florida. And we're running a funeral angle with the same date that guy died. Like there's just, I don't know. It feels like that was a blind spot in a major way.
That the day
That's the day he died. That day.
That's Sunday.
Yeah. He died in the afternoon. The pay-per-view was that evening. But
do you remember where you were at when you found out Dale passed away?
I remember people talking about it in a gas station. I was not watching. I've never been a NASCAR fan. I wasn't watching, but if you grew up in the South, you knew who Dale Earnhardt was.
Oh,
there's no doubt. You knew about the black car and you knew about number 3 and you knew about the Intimidator and Rubbins Racing. And even if you didn't watch the stuff, you knew about it. And people were talking about it at a gas station. And I was like, wait, what? Because, even when I saw the replay, I thought, well, that's not like the one that got the Allison boy. And like, there were so many of these spectacle crashes that, cars are flipping and turning and on fire and exploding. And then he ran into the wall and it didn't look nearly as gnarly, but that was enough.
So after the show, we went into Logan's, south of Nashville. And when we walked in, because we wanted to eat in a hurry, we walked over to the servant at the bar. We walked over there, and I can remember the bartender and like everybody in the restaurant. Now, this is, I don't know, 9:30, 10 o'clock, no, whatever the show, so 10 o'clock at night, whatever it may be, all this. But the restaurant was still pretty full, and the bar area was still pretty full. And I don't want to say people were whispering, but it was not your normal crowd. It was so low key. And we were like, wow. I just remember thinking, because, I've been around NASCAR a long, long time and knew lots of folks in it. And Dale is the Elvis, the Garth Brooks, the Michael Jackson, whatever you want to say. He was the guy, if you to try to put it in the best context. But I mean, it was somber in there. It was. Because like you said, the wreck happened and it was quick recap. It was at the very end of the race. The race finished. It wasn't like in the middle of it. It was all that. So they did it, finished the race, and and they knew it was bad. And, you know, the race went off, and I remember, cause it was show day, but I still was aware of all that. But by the time we get to Logan's and all that, now his death and the reactions begin to come out, obviously pre-social media. But man, Conrad, that's why I remember, okay, Karen gets mad at me if I can't remember to stop by the grocery, but I remember things like this in my career. But it was a very somber, almost eerie feeling in that restaurant, and people were glued and listening. No music playing, but they were listening to every word on all the different newscasts that Dale had passed away. It was wow. And now here you're talking about our wrestling world that I can't believe we did that, or they did that, or I was a part of that. But creative's creative, and I guess the creative folks were not NASCAR fans and had no idea. I don't know.
It's amazing to think that we still went forward with this silly funeral idea and a graphic with the same date, but we did.
And did this air
Yeah.
on Thursday of that week? He passed away
Yeah.
on Sunday.
Yes.
And it aired on Thursday. Wow. So, okay.
JArrett did a segment where he came out like he was Eddie Murphy and Nutty Professor with all the fat padding to imitate Dusty Rhodes. The idea was good, but the segment was terrible and seemed like it would never end. The crowd didn't know whether to laugh or cry. JArrett did a bunch of ridiculous Dusty spots on some job guys to take bumps for him the way the Horsemen used to in the 80s. That should have been funny, but for some reason it wasn't. JArrett just isn't funny, even with good material. Wow, thanks a lot for that, Dave. I think you're funny. Did you have fun with this? I mean, is this something where you're gonna go talk to Dusty ahead of time, I'm sure, and say, what do you recommend? What should I do with this? I mean, you want his co-opt on this, right?
He gave it its blessing. He was fun, looking forward to it. Conrad, and you know me, I would never just flat out say no. But I went to, like, I remember all of this. I knew it had the biggest chance to just completely flop because I don't do a good Dusty. I don't do impersonations, period. And everybody has their version of a Dusty. Bruce, I mean, literally all kinds of folks. You would just hear, I mean, day one when I got into the business, there's always been Dusty impersonations. And I went to Ed Farrar and I said, Ed, all right, Conrad, to really drill into the baseball, do you remember when me, you, and Mr. Silva, and I told him to meet me at a place at the Von Braun Civic Center?
The Elephant Door?
Guess where me and Ed Farrar stood? Right outside the Elephant Door on TV taping day. And I said, Ed, I don't do a good Dusty. Let's figure out how we can arrive at this without me having to do this. Or can I just talk in my normal voice? And he's like, no. He said, come here. I'll coach you up. So he told me how to enunciate certain words and this and that. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And he's like, here's the promo. And Dave's saying that it went long. Because Ed cut out, I can't say a half of it, but he definitely cut the promo down. So he's like, okay, we'll just kind of cut this out, cut that out. And you just do this part of it and go from there. So Meltzer he's never like me. He's going to be highly critical of everything I do. But I finally remember the execution of it, but the reaction, the people, they got with it. Do I do a great Dusty impersonation? No. But the point was across, and it was the build and everything that went with it. But I had a blast doing it. And if Dusty Rhodes gave it its blessing, I'm all right with it because he was totally fine with it and enjoyed it.
You would give one of the guys the shattered dreams. So Dustin comes out for the save. Rick Steiner attacks him. That allows you to clock him with a guitar. You're going to make fun of his dad, steal his move, and then you're in trouble. If you will. The
look at that crowd in the Von Braun.
Yeah, how about that? Decent little crowd.
If you're watching on My World YouTube.
You would also go ahead and wrestle Crowbar. Rhodes does a run in there. Palumbo is going to pin Luger clean with an inside cradle. They're trying to make Palumbo and O'Hare baby faces. The main event of Thunder with Scott Steiner beating Hugh Morris. The next week on Nitro, we've got a main event with you over Rhodes with Flair as the referee. And Flair, of course, is playing the total heel ref. But you and Dustin with Rick as the ref. Man, this is, I mean, just think about the history of just the names in there. The crowd was dead. The match was boring, according to Dave Meltzer. Flair did all the goofy spots and bumps, but didn't DQ Rhodes anyway. Rhodes kept on beating on Flair and JArrett, but looked terrible in doing so. At one point, it seems like Flair was a statue waiting forever to Rhodes to nail him so he could bump. The finish would see Flair hit a low blow to set up the stroke in 8 minutes and 37 seconds. Boy, I guess I knew that Dave didn't like Dustin and he didn't like you. But boy, when y'all wrestle together and he writes 2/3 of the write-up is about the referee.
Okay. This is another thing that jarred my brain. I remember having this discussion. Hey guys, do we really want to have this match when the biggest star is the referee? Can we have Rick come down on the end of it? Because that's the people will get engaged. If they see him out there the whole match, it's bad creative. Bad creative. It puts everybody in a checkmate spot, including Rick. Because if Rick stands there and doesn't do Rick, the people are like, what are we even doing here? None of y'all are entertaining us. So bad creative. I understood the direction they were trying to get, but we could have got the exact same thing accomplished with a ref bump and then Rick come down and do whatever it's going to, however it may be. Let him be there for 3 minutes as opposed to the whole deal.
You're back in the fat suit come Monday. Flair's going to come out with padding to look like he's 400 pounds and a mask. It's obvious it was Flair because he couldn't help but do a Buddy Rogers strut. JArrett's going to pin him right away. Dustin comes out. They fight until Flair is unmasked. Flair, who turned 52 last week, looked really bad taking one bump when nothing even remotely even aimed at him to miss, let alone hit him. Flair and JArrett did a few chair shots to the back when the real Dusty showed up. And the Rhodes cleaned house, and this time it was JArrett who took a bump from an elbow that missed by about 18 inches, made worse by the fact that it was then shown in the replay. Rhodes, after all these years, got to call the padded up Flair Fat Boy, which is what Flair used to taunt him as in the 80s. Flair dressing up like Dusty is not something I ever imagined. I'm sure you had to be thinking to yourself, what a hell of a way to make a living. I'm out here with Dusty Rhodes, and Ric Flair is cosplaying as Dusty Rhodes, and I'm getting bionic elbowed. They're going to pay me for this. This is crazy stuff.
Conrad, when I see that picture, I go right back to the flashback. That makeup job was not cheap.
No.
I mean, so that's flying in a whole special effects team to do this. And I get it. I mean, we're trying to entertain the folks, but yeah, it was surreal. And we were all having a blast. When you take out kind of the snippets and the work day and not get bogged down in the ins and outs and where's this creative going and who's winning and who's losing and who's doing this and all that. And you just soaked it all in, which me and Dustin did. Look at the guys. We wouldn't call them old guys, but maybe we did. But look at the guys. They're having a blast. And, the folks, the OGs, the Tony Schiavone's of the world, and maybe other backstage folks who had seen Rick and Dusty epic battles in the mid-'80s and all that, to see this in 2001 was a lot of fun for a lot of folks.
Yeah, listen, it is fun. I mean, it feels like something that you shouldn't be seeing, but you are. And it's pretty cool. Now, one thing I wanted to know from a performer standpoint, I mean, because even like the next week on Nitro, you're working with Rhodes again. I mean, you and Dustin are working an awful lot. Is that frustrating, or at this point, is it more of what you were talking about earlier? Hey, man, I'm here to clock in, clock out, and hope for the best.
Well, as far as working with the same opponent week in, week out, again, my upbringing was you can work with the same guy week after week after week. What's the new story you're telling? I think that's the essence, in my opinion, of how to work. Like fresh up matches every week. I think there's only so deep you could get from an emotional engagement. But the great feuds, if you will, through the years, Dusty, Rick, Lawler, Dundee, Lawler, and a number of folks, any territory you went, but also, I mean, Hogan, Savage. When you build upon layer upon layer upon layer of talents, relationships, then coming up with new twists and turns to a match is easy. And, me and Dustin, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, I didn't look at it at all matter of fact, I enjoyed it because we were telling the story. In essence, me and Dustin doing the work and Rick and Dusty doing the entertaining.
It's pretty wild. I mean, it's clear that the creative is interesting, but the fans, I mean, as we said, it's around 4,000 fans, and you're running Nitro and Thunder tapings on the same night in the same building. Considering where the WWF was when you left in 99, and you take a look and see what they're doing here in 01, were you second guessing your decision?
And we've talked about this in other podcasts. My deal structure coming in, and I made it very clear to actually J.J. Dillon first, then Bill Bush, and because they are having trouble and guys with limited dates and they can't do this and they can't do that. I had just come obviously from the WWF. I was really clear. Saddle me up, load me up. I want to work as many dates as I possibly can and do all that I can. And so my date was built with an upside. I was incentivized to work more dates. By this point, they had essentially cut out almost all house shows. And then when they doubled up Nitro and Thunder, I was just like, you've got to be kidding me.
Right.
And it was, on the one hand, I'm like, this is a royal screw job to my deal. And then on the other hand, I'm thinking, my God, I hope there's new ownership, because I was, mid-30s at the time. Physically, I could wrestle 7 nights a week. I was just ready to go. I knew I could. I didn't know exactly where I was going to fit in, Conrad, but I knew I could figure out some spot in all of that, because I was ready to work, and that was DDP loved to work and came to work, but there was a lot of dissension and unhappiness and just coming and check cashing and all that. But did I regret? No, because the reason being, and we've gone in super detail on this, I knew exactly. Now, look, Vince came in at the 11th hour and all that, but I kind of knew how things were. And, I wasn't on JR's team at that time, by not even remotely close.
Let's talk about the main event of the Observer here from the Thunder from the 14th of March. The main event is JArrett and Rick Steiner over DDP and Rhodes. Building was totally empty at this point. It was a ref bump. Flair did a run in, got bounced around, allowing JArrett to hit Rhodes with his guitar for the pin. Everyone from the locker room ran out, thereby violating the rule enacted to explain the logic of nobody helping DDP on Nitro, and the heels wound up running off. And now we're here. The final pay-per-view from WCW. Meltzer would say the biggest story backstage involved Luger and Bagwell, who may have greatly hurt whatever slim chances and virtually no chance of being picked up by the WWF with their reaction to being asked to put over Palumbo and O'Hare. Both complained loudly about it to the point most wrestlers thought they were being babies, and the way they stormed out of the building after the meeting to go to the gym made a lot of people think they weren't going to come back. And, I do want to ask Jeff about that. But before I do, I want to remind you that we've got a brand new affiliate partnership with Fanatics, the world's largest collection of officially licensed fan gear. It's an easy way to support your favorite podcast. Shop for your favorite players and teams by using our special URL, shopsportsmerch.com. That's shopsportsmerch.com. Or if you're watching along with us over on YouTube, what are you waiting for? Hit that QR code that's up on the screen right now, and it'll take you right to the website. That's shopsportsmerch.com, or you can check out the description for today's episode. We'll have the link there. But this is where you can shop for confidence with your favorite jerseys, caps, shirts, jackets, hoodies, Everything you enjoy with Fanatics, yes, everything, you can actually go ahead and support our show when you buy through shopsportsmerch.com. Same great pricing, same great products. It just helps our show. So if you haven't already, check out shopsportsmerch.com. And I want to talk to you about saving money over at savewithconrad.com. I'm routinely helping our podcast listeners get out of credit card debt. I just saw a report a couple of weeks ago. America has more credit card debt than ever before. Over $1 trillion in credit card debt. And if you're feeling stuck making minimum payments and it feels like you're never going to pay that thing off, we can help at savewithconrad.com. How's this for starters? No house payments for 2 months. If you haven't already, you won't have to make your March or your April payment. You're done until May 1st. And come May 1st, you're going to have a cheaper monthly payment. Now, how do we do that? Well, we take a look at your short-term and your long-term goals. If you'd like to pocket that house payment money for a couple of months, check, no problem. Wouldn't it be nice to get rid of that credit card debt and stop paying 28 or 31% or some other crazy amount of interest? Absolutely. Done, no problem. And now we could go ahead and pay the house off faster. That's something maybe you hadn't thought about before. But we're actually helping a lot of our listeners take their 30-year loan and pay it off in half the time. Not only do you get a better interest rate when you reduce the term, but if you knock out all the credit card payments you've been paying, you're probably spending it either way. I think, hey man, once you owe it, it's up to you how to pay it back. Doesn't it make sense to get the greatest tax deduction? See, the interest you pay on a mortgage is tax deductible, but the interest you pay on a credit card is not. Not only that, you know you can do better than 28 or 31% interest, and that's where we come in. We can help you consolidate all of that into one monthly payment. And guys, you don't need perfect credit. I mean it. Even if you had a bankruptcy 2 years ago, we can still help you. As a matter of fact, we've helped people who were in active bankruptcy. Routinely, we help people who were told no at their bank or credit union. If you're in a mobile home, if you have a credit score in the 500s or the low 600s, or maybe you need a government loan. A lot of these credit unions don't have access to the loans that we do. And there's programs out there, even for first-time home buyers. We have down payment assistance programs where you can still buy a house with no money down. So what are you waiting for? You've got a friend in the mortgage business. That's me. Drop me an email, conrad@savewithconrad.com, or give me a call toll free at 888-425-0105, or just find out for yourself how much money you can save for free at savewithconrad.com. So, Jeff, Lex Luger and Buff Bagwell walking out over refusing to do a job to Palumbo and O'Hare. What do you remember of that? Was this a big chatter backstage like it's made in the Observer?
Well, again, a little fuzzy of memory, but this is what I do recall thinking, well, hold on a minute. Lex and Buff, and they were both, and heck, even for me, I wasn't in the right headspace, probably in so many ways, but I thought that they were, we'll say, figured in to new ownership on some level. You know, Lex especially had been the jump and on the first Nitro and the run that he had and everything, and looked phenomenal. And but it surprised me. I'm like, really? They're not wanting to do a job. Like I didn't get, it surprised me. It surprised me they took a hard stance, and then it surprised me how they kind of did the cop out, or the just how they ended up working that. It just surprised me. I'm like, really, guys? It's a tag. You can figure something out where you can beat yourselves. But
well, that's what they wound up doing. I mean, Meltzer would say the match itself was booked for 8 minutes. It's supposed to be a hair pinning Luger with the Shanton bomb clean in the middle. Instead, after doing a lengthy interview, which was on the script, they went into business for themselves and did a spot where they knocked each other out and laid down for O'Hare to do his move on both of them, and then pinned Luger in 54 seconds. This was from the Kevin Nash school of doing a job, where if you do it quickly, nobody takes it as seriously as if you lose a hard-fought, longer match. Then both oversold the effects of this move for several minutes, including Bagwell trying to spoof his legitimate neck injury by not moving. Both men laid in the ring motionless while people at home were watching a video package building up the Cat versus Canyon match, almost doing a caricature of being paralyzed, which came off to the fans live as a blatant exposure of the business. And then when the cameras were back on, Bagwell moved, teasing a reoccurrence of his famous neck injury. Most of the wrestlers and virtually all of the agents were furious. Is this the way you remember it? Them just playing grab ass and people getting pretty pissed off about it?
Yeah, I wasn't totally dialed into it, but I knew that they did all, I'll call it the nonsense. I didn't know the agents were pissed off, but I can only imagine. But it still just kind of surprised me that at this stage that we knew this was like getting down to something was going to happen on some level. Like nobody could have ever dreamed that overnight WCW just be taken off the air. But we knew change was coming. So why upset things, and especially in this kind of situation with O'Hare and Jindrak, super athletic, big guys. It wasn't like it was doink. It was bizarre.
It is bizarre. Let's talk about the match. And this has to be a special spot in your wrestling career when you sit down and talk about what a crazy, strange trip it's been for you. Dusty and Dustin in a tag team to take on Ric Flair and Jeff Jarrett, and Ric Flair's wrestling in street clothes.
Oh boy. Can we ask that?
Huh, what's that?
Well, go ahead. I'll let you get to it because I'll sorry I stepped on top of you. I got comments already, but go ahead.
Go ahead. It's your show, baby.
You know the biggest letdown
was that he didn't wear the robe and all that?
Yes. I was.
You wanted the full Flair treatment, like.
I wanted the full Flair Dusty treatment.
Yes.
And the smug and arrogant, and look, at that point I knew Dusty would be coming out in a pretty much what he came in. That fit him, but I really thought Rick would come out in robe and boots and just everything that went with it. I was so disappointed that he was. I mean, God, he looked like he literally came out of the accountant's social.
No, he looked like he was across the street from the hotel at Bahama Breeze eating some black bean soup in his Hawaiian shirt and slacks and just cruised right over.
Bingo for bell time.
It's unbelievable, but he wrestles this entire match in slacks and a Hawaiian shirt. Tony Schiavone points out, as crazy as this is, that Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair had never faced each other on a pay-per-view. And I know what you're thinking. Well, no, what about Starrcade 84 and 85? That would be correct. But that's before pay-per-view was a thing. Those were closed circuits.
Conrad, that photo that's up right now.
Yes.
You just quickly look. Who's Rick look like? David?
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Side profile. Especially when he's got the haircut like that.
That's what I'm saying. The haircut and kind of the outfit, but anyhow, go ahead.
Except I don't, I mean, I hate David Flair's guts.
Okay.
Stacy Keibler. Come on, man. Piss on him forever. Fans are excited to see Dusty in, especially when he's in there with Flair. Meltzer would say Flair and Jarrett did their job to make Dusty look good, bumping for all of his spots. He did the elbow drop on Flair, but Jarrett saved. Dustin pinned Flair with one of the sloppiest inside cradles ever. After the match, Dusty pulled down his pants to reveal what could be called briefs, but not in his case, and gave Jarrett the Rikishi stink face. And I think this is the same pay-per-view where they had been cutting backstage all day during the show, and we saw him eating a platter of burritos. Well, I mean, you got paid American currency for this. Other people are digging ditches and walking tight ropes, and I mean, there's people scaling buildings to clean the windows, and here you are having Dusty Rhodes eat burritos and rub his underwear asshole in your face, and that's what you do for a living, Jeff. You have the most interesting job in the world, my friend.
Where is this? Jacksonville, if I remember correctly, I think.
Well, you never forget a place where you stick your nose where it don't belong.
But the people, and look, the context of Rikishi and the stink face and the kiss your ass club. I wish I knew better context on that. But in the arena,
Yeah, Jacksonville, you're right. 5,030 fans are there at the Coliseum.
The people, I mean, they ate it up, and that's why I thought it was Jacksonville, but it's Florida. Dusty super over, going back generations. They absolutely loved it. I mean, so entertaining. And Dusty, everything he did when he got in the ring, he had the people eating out of the palm of his hand. It's just, oh boy, I'll sound like such a.
No, listen, we like that. We like that real version of you. I mean, we got to see that a little bit after Rick's last match. You did that interview in the hallway outside of your dressing room at Municipal Auditorium, and you were emotional about, it was Rick's last match. And I wondered, did you get that same level of emotion after your nose had been all the way up Dusty's asshole in Jacksonville, Florida?
No, what I was going to say, asshole, no, is that Dusty physically did so little, but it's like, how do people, I say people, how do talent nowadays miss the opportunity to figure out how can I emotionally connect with this audience? Not because they're lazy and don't want to do high spots and don't want to work. And I'm not saying any of that. I'm talking about take your relationship, which will take your career to another level. Take your relationships with the fans and figure out how to connect. Now, Dusty had to do that because he had to draw money, because if he didn't draw money, he wouldn't be booked, period, like so many others. But, at this stage, Dusty is way past. I mean, he did the same bionic elbow. He did all of his stuff, but my gosh, had the people eating out of the palm of his hand, down to, hey, I'm going to pour my drawers down, show my big fat ass in enormous red briefs, and I'm going to entertain them this way.
It worked.
Classic Dusty, man. Classic.
The next episode is a weird episode because it's March 19th. That's 1 week prior to the very last Nitro. So this is the next to last Nitro ever from Gainesville, Florida. Dusty says he's going to eat 33 more burritos, and in Texas, they call it the stink facey. The main event on the show, believe it or not, was Flair kissing a donkey with the writing Dusty's ass on it.
Yep.
They beat up Dustin. Dusty makes the save. They beat him up. Dustin saves. Flair and JArrett had their faces rubbed into the donkey and kissed it as the show ended. This is the last time you appear on Monday Nitro. We know just a week later during the simulcast, you'll be publicly fired. But the last time we saw you on TV was with Dusty's ass. Goodness gracious.
Kissing a donkey. Beautiful, right? Just absolutely beautiful. I will say, leaving Nitro, well, I don't want to get too far, but we did the pay-per-view, and now, okay, something's going on. I can remember leaving Nitro because I went to Panama City the Wednesday of this week, and I knew something was up. We all knew something was up.
Let me remind everybody, you're doing Nitro and Thunder the same night. So Gainesville is also Thunder. And on that show, Flair would book Dustin against both Scott and JArrett. Steiner wins with the lead pipe. Booker makes the save. Before the match, Flair was shown laid out in his locker room. But that episode of Thunder, just days before the Panama City show, that's your last WCW appearance, which is pretty crazy to think about. I mean, talk about accomplishing a lot. I mean, from October of 99 through March of 01, literally a ton of stuff happened. I mean, if you just run through everything that happened storyline wise and in your career, but Bash at the Beach, becoming the world champion, the reset with Bischoff and Russo, the lawsuit with Hogan and Russo, and Bischoff's going to buy it. No, he's not. I mean, what a crazy stretch there. I mean, it's got to be one of the wilder. I mean, what would you think? 18 months of your career?
So back up. Think about because it was about that time. Think about the last 24, that 24-month snapshot.
Yeah.
From
99. March 99.
Yes, because that's when the China stuff and the IC champion. And lack of a better word, Owen passed away in May. So it's end of May. So June of 99 until March 2001. That 22 months, Conrad, was because the China stuff was just unique and groundbreaking, and the character was red hot, and the Moolah guitar shot that got so much talk, and Figure Four and Cindy Margolis, and then just kind of that WWF deal, and like going to Cleveland, and nobody thought, even including myself up until the last week, you kind of jump. And obviously I didn't think I was going the wrong way from a promotional standpoint, but it all worked out. But yeah, so the last 20 months, or this snapshot of this 20 months, was absolutely insane, Conrad. All the different things that went into it were, I'll say this, Conrad, a boatload of podcast material. There's no way we can cover it all.
It's pretty remarkable to think how it all comes to an end too. I mean, you've done everything. I mean, along the way, you wrestled with Flair and Dusty, and Jimmy Snuka jumped off the cage on you. You hit Beetlejuice with a guitar. I mean, so much silliness and over the top stuff. But when it's all said and done, it feels like the Magnificent Seven. It's not finalized. I mean, by the time we get to the last Nitro, it's like almost all storylines out the window, and here's one last show. But do you think there could have been a compelling story in here somewhere for the Magnificent Seven? What would you have liked to have seen the payoff be? Or, I mean, is that even worth discussing? Because it feels like 100 years ago at this point.
Here's kind of what I've always, I try to like put on the different caps. And from a fan, you just laid out who the Magnificent Seven were. The baby faces: Nash, DDP, Booker. I'm missing a few more, but it's very, very reminiscent of the April of 2000 when Hogan and Bischoff came back, and you had, the New Blood versus the Millionaires Club, or whatever it's called. So what was the angle of the Magnificent Seven? I don't think you can define that right now. Yes, it was quasi control, who had the belts, who didn't have the belts, but we came together as a group. But what was the mission statement when we're writing this chapter of WCW? I think we can talk about who the heels and the babyface were, but what were the stakes? What was the storylines? And where were the payoffs? That's why in a snapshot, me and Rick kissing Dusty's ass, both his own ass and a donkey's ass. It jumps off the page as far as entertainment value, but where the hell did that come from in the Magnificent Seven storyline? It didn't.
Tyler wants to know, do you feel the Magnificent Seven was too big of a faction? How many members is too many, or does it vary from group to group? That's an interesting question. What say you, Jeff?
Oh, timing is everything. And I think when you kind of go back in time and look at we'll call it the most successful, NWO, Hall, Nash, and Hogan, just those three, very easy to conjure up great memories of that success. Once you get past, once you started adding, and no disrespect to anybody, but it started getting watered down to me on the fourth member. Now, look, hindsight's 2020, but certainly the first three are unique. The original Four Horsemen, I think,
with the manager JJ, sort of like really DX when you think about New Age Laws, Waltman, Hunter, and then China. There's your five.
Yeah.
If you count China as part of it. So I think 4 or 5 is probably the right number.
I think any past 4 is really stretching it. I mean, 4 and a manager. So 5, you're probably the same thing.
Yeah.
Tough. I mean, it just is.
Do you consider 3 a stable or a faction? I mean, like the Freebirds, is that a faction?
I consider it a faction. Yeah, I do.
Okay. Well, I didn't know, if Excalibur's here, he might say that's actually a trios. Francis wants to know, when did you know that WCW was dying as a brand? Was there like one moment where you're like, oh shit, this is really it? This thing's circling the drain.
Well, the progressive disasters of producing non-compelling, I'll call it, bad TV, and not so much the ratings, because the ratings from a comparative standpoint were always not great, but above network average. And I think there's a lesson in all this. The ratings are a barometer, but not the only one. The live event gates, and we've kind of covered that. I think the Chapel Hill, North Carolina one that we covered, from 12 months to 12 months, and how drastically it dropped. But just the decline in attendance, merchandise follows, and now there's so many other barometers. So was there any one point when that I thought WCW was dead? No. To this day, I don't think anybody, and look, Dark Side of the Ring, or maybe there'll be an A&E biography one day, like what really went on behind the scenes was the chess match for Jamie Kellner to say, oh, no, we're just going to shut it down. And we're going to write off the losses, and it's game, set, match. And, oh, hey, WWE, here's your library of 20 years or whatever it was for, gosh, Conrad, was it even pennies on the dollar? No, I'm going to say it was less than pennies on the dollar. And it was over. I don't think anybody saw that coming. Because I think if they would have really tried to I don't think there was ever an exercise that we're going to get top dollar for this brand. We're going to sell it, but we're going to get top dollar. I don't think they ever really went through that exercise, because somebody would have certainly paid much more than 2 or 3 million. So up until that decision was made, and look, I think that was made. Conrad, do you know from your other podcast? My gut tells me it was made after Gainesville.
Yeah, I think the decision was made during the pay-per-view. I mean, even on the pay-per-view, you heard a message from Eric Bischoff. So I think, we knew what was coming. And that brings up an interesting question. Justin wants to know, do you think some of the guys were perhaps, instead of doing things to help the company, were instead focused on presenting themselves in a way that WWE may hire them? Like, do you think people were already thinking about the next step?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's something that, gosh, Conrad, I just had a thought in my mind because I had it reading the research. Oh, I know. Different ins and outs. My dad, being an English major and loved to write and philosophize, and Conrad, I'm sure you're on the other end of some of those phone calls that would go on forever, but he wrote Bob Carter a thesis, and I swear I wish I could find this. One day maybe I will, on the mind of a wrestler, and just the ins and outs of the intricacies, that it's just different. It's not all athlete, it's not all entertainment, and it's the mind of a professional wrestler and all the ins and outs and what go with it. But at its very core, when you go through the curtain and you're performing, yes, you are performing for the crowd that's in attendance and the millions watching around the world. But there's also, as a part of your DNA, you're performing for an audience of who writes the contract. And in this case, they knew their current contract was soon to end. So they were performing for someone that they hope would sign them to the next contract. So whether it was going to be the WWE, or it was going to be Bischoff's group, or another group, or maybe a Japan promotion, maybe a Mexican promotion. But yes, the guys that were a part of the roster in that last 90 days or so, I absolutely think they were performing for their next contract. And everybody probably had a little bit of a different opinion on who that would be.
One last question, then we'll put a bow on this one. One of our favorite follows on Twitter, Andrew Dice Clay, wants to know, who would Jeff say had a better roster, WCW in 2001 or TNA in 2006?
Woo!
And those are interesting, to say the least. I do think we should run through some of the names that we would see in WCW 2001. AJ Styles is on that roster, Alex Wright, Arn Anderson, Animal, Bam Bam Bigelow, Buff Bagwell, Chronic, Booker T, Billy Kidman, Christopher Daniels is there, Billy Kidman, Disco, DDP, Dustin Rhodes, Elix Skipper, Evan Courageous, Ernest Miller, Jamie Noble, Goldberg, Duggan, Jindrak, Storm, Conan, Kid Cash, Kevin Nash, Mike Awesome. I mean, it's a loaded roster, and we're not even halfway through it. I mean, Sean O'Hare and Shane Douglas and Rey Mysterio and Ric Flair and the Steiners and Sid and Terry Funk and Lex Luger and Vampiro and Sting. I mean, it is a who's who. But to our man Andrew's point, TNA 06 was hopping too. Abyss and AJ Styles and Alex Shelley and BG James and Austin Aries and the Dudleys and Christian Cage and Chris Sabin and Christopher Daniels and so many others. You know, the names that you would expect, like yourself and Jeff Hardy and Jay Lethal and Jerry Lynn. But Kevin Nash is still there. But so are guys like Homicide and Kurt Angle and Conan and Sabu and Sting and Sean Waltman. I mean, it's closer than I thought it might be, but I, as a fan, would still give the edge, name-wise, to WCW 2001. What say you?
Dice Man's great. Hell of a follow. Very intriguing. He is I crack up, but he's very good. But
Andrew, I hope I'm saying that right.
Ian.
Jeff and I send your messages back and forth to each other more often than we can possibly like or retweet them, because that would be a bad look if we liked or retweeted them. So we will just text it to each other and then just call each other, laugh out loud, and hang the phone up. So solid follow, but not one that we can show a lot of love to on the Twitter machine.
So, but I want to make sure. What's the better roster?
Yeah, 01 WCW or 06 TNA?
So obviously, it's subjective. Obviously, I'm going to be partial. I'm a part of both of them, but when I kind of look, God, like, what's the better roster? I bet when you list them all out, there's double the amount of bodies on the WCW roster, so it's double. So return on investment, and again, we're playing some fun wrestling games here because it's so subjective. But you know, the coverage that TBS and TNT, Nitro and Thunder and this era and you know, even the ratings, WWE was kicking their ass, but it was still good ratings. You know, so that awareness and exposure, it's easy to kind of lean that way. But I am partial, but I think for good reason. Return on investment. I think defined characters. Were we perfect at TNA? Hell no. But when you added Kurt to that mix and kind of looked at, I always like to look at a roster, someone like a great Hollywood blockbuster or a great team. You got to have your leading actors or your MVPs. You got to have your supporting cast. You got to have your legends in the right spot. You got to have your up and comers, and then you got to have. And I don't say role players as in it's the opposite of being demeaning. It's guys that know that I am working, hypothetically speaking, in the semi-main event, and my job is to go out there and get this guy over and get him ready for the main event. And there could be different guys at different times throughout their career. I thought at TNA at times, as challenging as it was, because people were fighting and clawing, not just for money for dates, because dates turned into money, but everybody really rode in the same direction for the most part. And that is irreplaceable. And people in WCW in this era, I mean, if we would have all had a oar in the water, we wouldn't have just been spinning like we'd never gotten anywhere because nobody was rolling in the same direction at any level. So I'm going to go TNA 2006. Dice Man, I hope I answered your question.
Well, we should talk about do a little tease. I hope we can do it justice because next week you and I are going to be in our feels a little bit because Sting is going to be doing his last match next weekend.
Wow.
We're within striking distance of this thing. It's getting closer and closer and closer. And as you're listening to this, next weekend is Sting's last match. And next Wednesday is when Sting is going to do his last set of television as an active wrestler. Both Dynamite and Collision will be filmed here in Huntsville, Alabama. I'll be there. Jeff will be there. We hope you make plans to join us. AEWTIX.com. I know that a lot of the cheap seats sold out right away. I would bet that they continue to open up some spots. So if you look before and they were sold out, take a look again because some production kills will open up and it is going to be a part of wrestling history you don't want to miss. AEWTIX.com. But next Tuesday, right here on My World, just one day before Sting's last Dynamite, we're going to be talking all things Sting. We're going to talk about Sting, or Steve Borden, as he was known once upon a time, coming into Memphis, eventually making his way over to WCW. He spent some time with Jeff there. And then, of course, that entire TNA run. And even though we don't talk about current stuff, we'll talk a little bit about Sting and AEW. I can't believe we're finally here, man. Like, it feels like we've been talking about Sting's last match for months. And for it to be 10 days away, talking about Sting next week on the show just makes sense to me.
I love doing the podcast. And you were right all along, dating back 4 or 5 years ago. Hey, Jeff, you want to do a podcast? No, Conrad, I really don't have any interest, and the people won't either. But anyway, I am so looking forward to it. Over the last month, CBS Sports and a bunch of outlets have asked, and I feel honored when I hear the AEW PR team say, hey, man, they would really kind of like your comments on Sting. You've kind of been with him much more than just the AEW run. And as I start getting questions asked and going through things, and I think about the very first territory that he worked was for my father, and knowing that story, the ins and outs of it so well that we'll tell next week, and then the WCW run, and then the TNA run. And then we're going to get up into our, the me seeing him for the very first time when we were both in the WWE. He had already had more or less his wrestling run, but he was still making appearances. We did a table for three, and we can probably get into that. And then I think how life has happened, Conrad. And who would have thought in a million years that my very first match, Conrad, next week is going to be a lot of fun.
It is.
It is going to encapsulate a 30-year friendship.
Yes, sir.
And a 30-year working relationship. I didn't want to say rivalry because that sounds like, no, I'm not saying that. It's just we, in our professional life and our personal life, we got a lot of history. We may go a little long next week, Conrad. I'll shut up. You're going to get on me for giving it away, but I'm excited about next week.
I'm excited about it too. Tell your friends to check us out. We're doing our thing over on YouTube too. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn the notifications bell on. We're going to be going live in the new year early and often, and you don't want to miss it. That's myworldonyoutube.com. You can also advertise very affordably on our program. You hear some of the same ads week in, week out, and that's because it really works. If you're looking for dudes 25 to 54, we got them. Find out how affordable it can be for you at advertisewithJArrett.com. And if you've got a question for the Stinger, you want to know what Jeff thinks about Surfer Sting or Crow Sting or Joker Sting or any Stings in between, next week is all things Sting at MyWorldPod on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Love to have your interactions and your questions there. Got some great new swag and merch out available as well over at boxofgimmicks.com. Jeff, I never know what to expect when we sit down and click record, but talking about the bad years of WCW makes me smile every time.
this sounds maybe a little pompous, but there's a lot of. I'm not saying it's good history,
but there is history.
Well, in the context of the industry, there's a lot of history there. I mean, there really, really is, and so it makes me chuckle. You know, the American Dream, if you will, in Huntsville, that segment stands out to me. One of my favorite personally, because I mean, it challenged me. Did I do great? I don't know about that, but it still it was one of those segments that I went, all right, that was fun.
By the way, that is a real look at Jeff Jarrett in 2022 when he was eating at G's Country Kitchen
in Huntsville.
It's a meet and three here in Huntsville that I absolutely love and highly recommend. If you ever find yourself in North Huntsville, go to Oakwood, G's Country Kitchen, tell the owner Maurice we said hello. But
Conrad,
Jeff,
instead of calling it a meet and three, when me and you go there, do they call it meets and 5, meets and 6, and meets and multiples? That's it. Meets and multiples is when Connie and Jeff go in there. Meets and multiples.
Seriously, normally what it is you tell her, the lovely waitstaff there, do you want dark meat or white meat? And if you pick white meat, they give you a breast and a wing. I switch mine up and I say, I don't want the wing. Give me 2 breasts. And they know that. So Jeff was like, oh, you can do that. So the lady's got her pad. Let me see if I can get a napkin here. She's got her pad ready to go. Okay, baby. Now what did you want? And Jeff goes, 2 breasts, 2 wings, 2 thighs, 2 legs. And she says, damn, you just want the whole chicken? Yes, ma'am, I do. So that photo of you, the dweem, you know what? Let's go ahead and throw a shirt up now. We're going to have a shirt available this week. BoxingGimmicks.com. The American Dweem. And we might even Photoshop a caricature of your face on the KFC logo or something. We're going to have fun with this, but that's a real look. That's a real story. If you ever have a chance to eat a meal with Jeff Jarrett, do it. When he was in town doing media a few weeks ago, I jumped at the chance and I told the waitress, I said, we're going to have 4 place settings, but one guy's going to eat for 3. And she was shocked it wasn't me or Casio. It was the in shade guy. And goodness gracious. All right, boys and girls, that'll do it. We are finished talking about WCW in 2001. We'll never finish talking about Sting. We're going to try our best to do the man justice next week. If you haven't already, try to make plans to join us in Huntsville. It's going to be a celebration. AEWTIX.com. And of course, the waterworks are going to be there for everybody in Greensboro just a few days later. Handful of tickets remain. They're going to open up some more production kills. I just have that feeling in my bones. But if you can't be there, like I won't be able to be there, I'm not going to miss it on pay-per-view, and you shouldn't either. Revolution coming sooner rather than later. But first, next week, it's Sting. Or I'm sorry, as Tony would say, it's Sting! Right here on My World.
Peace.